Hey guys, so what's been happening in the hobby this week? Well, I thought we'd have a little bit of a discussion on enjoying the modern classics. So what do I mean by that? Well, minis that have come out, in recent years that may not be the new hotness, the new thing, but are still really wonderful minis and worth your attention, And one of those for me is the Primaris Librarian that was released, I guess, sometime around, I think it's one of the earliest ones actually for 8th edition. But I think this guy really is a quintessential kind of distillation of the modern Space Marine. He's got all the elements and the attitude of him, everything that really showcases what the new Space Marines are all about. And for me, this is one of those really cool models. I've always wanted to paint him, and today is that day. So we're going to be painting him in my custom scheme. Going through the metal armor and so on. And for his cloak, I think we're going to be doing something that's very classic for me, blue into green. So that'll be cool, but slightly different blue, I guess, into green. But it'll probably end up being that. If obviously you've seen the thumbnail, so you know what I'm about to paint. But yeah, I think he'll be a great one to add to the collection of my little custom Space Marine chapter, and which incidentally I still haven't named yet or decided on the chapter symbol. Maybe if you've got some ideas, you can put them in the comments, but that's still coming along. At the moment, it's sort of veering towards maybe a Dark Angel successor chapter or something like that. I've always loved Dark Angels, so yeah, but maybe something else, I don't know yet, but we'll see. But yeah, I think it'll be a really fun one to do, and we'll just have a little bit of a discussion on some of the benefits of getting into some of those models that might be sitting in your collection, sitting there unpainted, but would be beneficial to take another look at them and maybe get some paint on them and enjoy the experience of those models. But anyway, we'll get started and get this discussion going, eh? So yeah, modern classics. Yeah, so the Primaris Space Marine for me, the Librarian, is one of those models, and I guess where we'll begin this is thinking about the fact that the pace of this hobby and the release schedules of most of the companies that produce minis, and also independent producers and artists like myself that also produce minis and so on. Just the rate of it, the sheer quantity of it, and it's hard sometimes to really lock down and focus on any one thing because there's so much going on, and you can lose sight of some of those really great minis that have come out in the past from different producers, not just Games Workshop, that are worth spending a bit more time on and going back and taking a look. I mean, if you look at my channel, I don't always really keep up with the new things. My videos sort of come out at a different kind of pace and a different kind of schedule to what, let's say, maybe GW is doing or other companies are doing. So I don't always get to the new thing straight away. It sometimes can be quite a long time. Like this mini I'm painting now, and and in some ways that's just something that just happens, incidentally, like I'm not planning on that. But then in other ways, it is, intentional, and I do try to go off the beaten track a little bit and look at some different minis and different processes that might not be, covered as much in the sort of the main content kind of spill that comes out of YouTube, that sort of thing. Just to give people a variance and something else to look at, and gives you different perspectives. And so with that, that's the sort of thing that you're looking at when you go back and take a look at some of these models that do have that kind of quintessential thing about them that might define a faction, or in this case a chapter maybe, or that sort of thing in a game. So for me it was the Primaris one. There's many others, and they sort of reinvigorate something in you to do with that particular faction or army or game or whatever the mini represents to you, or you think is cool about that, and it really does reinvigorate those ideas that you sort of started out with. That it's almost a retroism, but we'll get into that in a second. But it's not quite, because these are still relatively new minis. But in terms of the scale of releases, they suddenly become old, right? Like they're gone in a second, sort of thing. But they're not. They're still fresh. They're still new. There's nothing wrong with these minis or focusing some attention on them. And it does dovetail into a sort of retroism. But I don't really consider this to be a retro sort of sensation. This is still, yeah, still fresh, still modern minis that you're going into. So yeah, this might be a mini that you have in your collection, or it might be one that you choose to go out and get. And in either case, it does do that. It sort of brings you back to something about the initial vibe, or the earlier vibe that you had for this, that might reinvigorate some of your hobby. You know, like it's very common for hobbyists, for all of us, to go through ebbs and flows of being really into it, and then sort of dipping out a little bit, or even altogether. And then that's totally natural. And these sorts of minis, if you sit down and you decide to do one, can help reinvigorate your energy levels for it. Much in the same way as we've talked about before in these chats, refresher models and that sort of thing, and varying your projects and that sort of idea. That this goes along with that as well. It gives you a chance, because most likely it's going to be a mini that's not normally what you paint regularly, and it'll be something else. So quite often, not always, but quite often. And so that can help to reinvigorate your painting process and your love of the creative side of this. And and with the gaming side, I mean, often, as we know, minis come and go in their dominance, and sometimes you'll paint one of these more, I guess, modern classic minis, and they'll just happen to be really good right now in the meta, and you'll suddenly be able to use them and have really great time using them in games. And that does happen, and that's kind of cool, something that's been in your cupboard or sitting on a shelf that's just suddenly become awesome, and now you get to paint it. You got a reason to paint it, to put on the game. If you're more of a gaming focused hobbyist, that's a great reason to go and paint it, right? You've now got something that you can use, and it gives you that double whammy of being a cool project to get into, and also then being able to use it, effectively in games. So that's really cool as well. So there's a lot of benefits to going back through, and that's just in your own collection. Obviously, it slays the grey, it gets you, your minis painted, that sort of thing. But also to search out there for minis that you might have missed, or haven't gotten a chance to paint yet, and that's another great one to do. So whether it's from your own collection or getting it, fresh. Both cases, I think, really do add to this sort of positive outcome for painting them, and I think that's really cool. So one of those things that is quite popular at the moment is that retroism, or looking back on early minis. There's many channels, content creators, people out there painting old minis from the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, and sort of tapping into that retro thing. And even GW themselves do that. A lot of their modern minis are resculpts of old minis, or trying to harken back to something earlier, like that Black Templars mini that was released a while ago, that was from the 3rd edition cover, the one with the axe in his hand, really almost identically designing the mini to look like the art, that sort of thing. So they also engage in this, and it's doing something where it's sort of invoking that the child in the earlier time, and giving you that sort of fun feeling, and I think that's common in our hobby. It's part of collecting, part of holding on to these little men that we like, and it reminds you of those times, a little bit like a photograph, really. When you pick up old minis that you painted a long time ago, or things in your collection, even if they're unpainted, it suddenly evokes something about a time and place of when you had this, and that's a really great feeling. Other people talk about things like Stillmania, or is it Stillman? Yeah, the early GW guy that was talking about, you collect an army and you never change it, and you play with that army and you do that, and then you move on to a new project and that sort of thing. But that project stays as it is. It's sort of like encapsulating a moment in time, and all the experiences that you gain from that Stillmania approach relate to that one thing, and it has value, right? It is a way that you can collect and game and do that sort of thing. But it is tapping into that sort of like accessing something that is almost like a time capsule, and that's sort of the feeling that you get when you look at these modern classics. You can still capture some of that element and some of that type of thing. It doesn't have to be super old or super in the past in order to evoke those feelings and those memories of an earlier time. It's like a little micro version of it, and I think that's where it does definitely intersect with the retroism that has been going on on in the hobby, well, right from the start, really. But, you know, it's a fun thing for all of us to indulge in, to talk about the past being better than the future and all that sort of thing, or having elements that were really awesome that are now no longer there. You know, the sort of conversations that all of us hobbyists get into when we talk about older editions, older minis, etc., etc. But that doesn't mean that the newness, the current stuff is bad or anything like that, because some of it is really beautiful and amazing, and the hobby continues to grow. It's one of the things I noticed when I got back into the hobby was, you know, just the explosion of options and new things and beautiful sculpts and everything like that. Just a plethora of minis to look at. So that was a wonderful thing to see when I first got back into it after having a bit of a break, and yeah, that's wonderful, right? So it's you know, both the future and the past have their place in this hobby, that's for sure. So what are some of those positive elements to do with the creativity side of it? Well, I've touched on an aspect of it. You've got the sort of like the refresher model type of approach, which allows you to, you know, reinvigorate yourself creatively, and it does offer you a chance to maybe explore your process and the colors and techniques that you use. And I think that's a real great benefit of something like this. So, you know, picking something that you may or may not actually paint regularly, or haven't painted in a while, you know, does give you that opportunity to think about that and explore those things a little bit outside of the norm. And I think that's a really great thing to do in this hobby, and I talk about it a lot in a lot of these discussions. You know, sort of digging into that and allowing some exploration time within your hobby. I think that's really, really cool. And focusing on a single mini like this, especially if the classic modern mini that you're looking at just happens to be a nice little single figure. That's a great one, right? I'm a big believer of that. You know, don't sort of tackle the biggest dragon or whatever, or mech or whatever you're looking at, you know, as your refresher model or your thing to go back to, you know, Warhound Titan, etc. That's probably going to be a little bit much, you know, especially if you've been finding yourself, you know, waning a little bit with the hobby, and you're not as invigorated to do it. You know, pick a manageable miniature project, you know, something that you can actually finish, because I think that will give you the best you know, benefits of this type of approach. You know, if it's another unfinished project or something you don't really get through, that's kind of although that's fine. Like, you know, you don't have to finish things. I've talked about this before. Artists don't finish every project they start. You know, creativity isn't about, you know, start thing, do thing, finish thing. It's not really a checklist of items that you have to actually accomplish. That is also another aspect of this. We might talk about that in a second. But you know, you're not trying to, you know, necessarily finish it, but the point is to, I guess, get something out of it that in and of itself is like a completion, right? It might not be that the physical model is actually all finished, but you get the enjoyment out of it and the experience that you've intentionally tried to get out of this whole project. That is in essence finished, you know, and then you put it aside. So yeah, that might not be that the whole mini is actually fully painted, and that's okay. As I've said, that not everything needs to be finished. That's a thing that isn't really talked about a huge amount in the miniature world, and I think mostly because not everyone identifies themselves as an artist or as a creative, that sort of thing. But as I've said many times on this channel, if you're engaged in this hobby, then you actually are an artist, and you are, you know, an artist of sorts, and you are engaged in a creative pursuit, which means that these sorts of ideas and concepts do count, even if you don't think about them much, or don't maybe align yourself with that idea, even if you think of yourself as purely a gamer and this is just a way to get something done so you can get to the gaming side. You're still engaged in it, and so things like that are something to consider. You don't have to complete everything. It's a really important point, you know, to get the benefits out of that process. So yeah, just something to think about. But anyway, so, you know, we're getting back to this idea of, you know, a manageable project, and that will allow you to explore those creative things, even if it's only on a very small scale, a singular technique or something that you just want to try that's different. Maybe there's a new contrast paint or a new, you know, speed paint or whatever you want to try, or maybe you haven't done zenithal highlighting, you know, undercoating before, and you want to, you know, put some washes down over some, you know, brighter primed paint, that sort of thing. You know, anything at all that might interest you. That's a great time to be exploring that on one of these classic, you know, modern classic minis. So are there any cons to this? Well, I don't think that there are any cons. Often some of these topics, I really struggle to think of anything, especially when it comes to the creative side, whether there is in fact actually a con to it. And I don't think there is, apart from things like, cost, that sort of thing, prohibitive elements to that. If there's something that you really want that you can't afford, which is totally understandable. The world is crazy, and, cost of living and all that sort of stuff is through the roof everywhere in the world, wherever you are. And, that has to be taken into consideration before you engage in things like this. But apart from those sort of real world, I guess, cons, which aren't really inherently the hobby's fault exactly, except obviously companies that set their prices, that sort of thing. But that is the only, I guess, maybe con there. But in terms of the actual experience of doing this, I don't really see much of a con exactly, unless if you maybe overload yourself with too many goals or intentions to do with doing this. That might inhibit your process and negatively impact it, which, as I said, in this is that you don't have to necessarily complete this. It's not, creative projects aren't always about completion, and that's something to consider. So that would be, I guess, the way to arm yourself against that sort of con that might occur in terms of layering too much on yourself, because this is like a refresher idea. So you want to be as free and open as possible. I think that's probably the main thing, is to be very loose and open to exploring things and just allowing the process to go as it goes. It's a playful thing. If you go in with that kind of idea and don't overload yourself with too much, then I think you'll have a much better time with it than if you try to load it, because often our bigger projects are loaded with a lot of goals and intentions, and that's where that overloading on your mental state for the hobby can burn you out a bit. So this is about the opposite of that, of having something a lot looser, a lot more free flowing, and I think that'll really arm you against a lot of the cons that might come from this. But I can't really think of anything that's a real big con here. Most of it's positive. If you're painting an existing mini, you're getting that done. You're slaying the grey, that sort of thing. You're getting more minis painted. You're exploring techniques. You're exploring your creative process. You might be gaining a model that now is really great in the game, and you can now use it and enjoy that experience. If it's purchasing a new model, you might be supporting a creator like me, or getting a third-party vendor model, that sort of thing. Or you might be getting one from a main producer, whatever it is. But you're expanding your collection and creating new ideas there, which is always fun, and appreciating the art of minis themselves. And that's a really awesome one, just to indulge in that. That's a great thing, because these minis are really cool and are art objects in and of themselves, and deserve to be appreciated like that. Someone somewhere spent a lot of time designing it and putting the love and attention to it, even if it's in a big company like Games Workshop is. There is still a sculptor there, a bunch of artists there that have spent their time to actually make this mini the best they can with the time that they've got allowed. They don't always get a lot of time, but I can assure you, artists take their pursuit seriously, and they will be endeavoring to put the best foot forward and create something really beautiful with what they have available at hand, the resources they have available, and the time and energy they have to actually put towards it. No artist just throws something out that they don't at least invest some effort into. That's not really something that artists do. Art in general is very, very difficult, and it takes a lot of your energy, and it's sort of counterintuitive, right? It's not really based around survival or these other sorts of ideas. I mean, yes, if you're getting paid to do it, sure, but mostly it isn't really needed, right? You need food, sleep, etc. But making art isn't one of those basic fundamental things to keep you alive. I mean, some would argue it is, and I would argue it is, but it isn't one of those basics things that you need. It's like a nice to have. It increases the experience of life in general and makes things really beautiful and amazing, but it's not there at the basics, just for those basic survival aspects of living. And so, it does take effort. And so those artists do put that work in, basically, is what I'm saying. So yeah, and engaging with that conversation with those creative people that have made that object is a wonderful little symmetry or little dance that you get to play in as you paint that mini. The sort of the grand meta of that, in between you and the mini. It's not just you sitting at a table. There's a whole sort of invisible structure, like a little pathway that links to all these other creative people and all these other hobbyists and enthusiasts around the world that are also doing the same thing you are. Like I'm sure there are, thousands upon thousands of other artists and creative people and hobbyists like yourself that have all painted this Primaris Librarian. I get to add mine to that collection and that story and that sort of narrative, and that's beautiful as well. That's another aspect to this. So I think I've waffled on long enough and talked about my love of this sort of thing, and I hope that's given you some inspiration to think of your own modern classic that you wouldn't mind painting or having a go at. And I hope you do. That'll be wonderful. If you do, leave a comment down there in the down there and let me know what you did, and that'll be really wonderful too to hear from you and hear what your, I guess, modern classic or the thing that you wouldn't mind doing at some point in the future. That's great. So now I'll see how we've gone with this Primaris Librarian and see where I've ended up. I'm pretty sure it'll be cool. It's doing all the favorite colors that I like and enjoy doing, blue, greens and all that. But I'm sure it's cool. So we'll have a look at him and my closing thoughts, and we'll finish this one off, eh? And there we go, one Primaris Librarian, all done. Let's take a look. Yeah, so this is really cool. This model I've wanted to paint for so long, and it's so cool to finally have him done. Such a cool model, and really, for me anyway, epitomizes the modern Space Marine and what they're all about. And I think, he's super cool. If you haven't painted this guy and you like Space Marines, I would say, definitely pick him up or get him out of your closet or wherever he's sitting, and give him a go, because he's a fun one. He's got some great shapes on him. Really enjoyed painting this one. It was surprisingly cool. So I'm really happy to put him into the collection. He's good. So I hope you've enjoyed this little conversation, I guess, on the modern classics and getting into minis like this. It's a cool thing to get into and have a go at. And I hope that's inspired some of you to maybe give it a go yourself. You won't be sorry. As I said before, I can't really see any cons to doing this. It's pretty fun. So I hope that's been a nice little conversation. So I'll leave a nice image for this one, as I normally do, and the paint list and that sort of thing at the end. But I hope you've enjoyed this. Please hit that like button, subscribe button. It really helps me out. And I guess I'll catch you on the next one.